This essay will be quite straightforward. We will obsess over one single quote from Ted Kaczynski's The Industrial Society and Its Future that is quite relevant to any conservatives or traditionalists watching. The quote is the following, quote, "The conservatives are fools. They whine about the decay of traditional values, yet they enthusiastically support technological progress and economic growth. Apparently, it never occurs to them that you can't make rapid, drastic changes in the technology and economy of a society without causing rapid, drastic changes in all other aspects of the society as well, and that such rapid changes will inevitably break down traditional values." End quote. Our favorite schizoterrorist does it again. This quote is at least a good explanation of why the conservatives have been losing the culture war since the 60s, the New Deal, the French Revolution, the English Civil War, even the Reformation. It is hard to say, but at least since living memory, the conservatives have been losing, and this quote offers a pretty convincing explanation of why this is. For example, the French Revolution was the result of the scientific revolution, which led to the Enlightenment and the feudalism. Or that the counterculture of the 1960s was the result of the great prosperity that the boomers experienced while growing up, combined with the new technology such as the birth control pill that enabled the sexual revolution. Perhaps this explanation is not complete, and remains only a partial explanation of the phenomenon of the conservative tradition of losing culturally and politically. But even still, it is undeniable that technological progress is one of the myriad of reasons why it seems that the conservative right seems so helpless, so addicted to losing. This argument is further reinforced when we look at the communities that have successfully retained their traditional values against the flood of the modern. So, which are the communities that have succeeded in this endeavor? The Amish seem to come to mind, the Haredi Jews also, and maybe we could even add the Taliban to the list. But beyond this, it is difficult to come up with more communities that have successfully resisted modernity. What they all have in common is that they have similar attitudes towards technology. They regard it as an existential threat. It is far easier to name the conservative communities that have been overrun by modernity. But how can we measure this? How can one measure the decay of traditional values? One measurable indicator is that these traditional communities have very high fertility rates, especially compared to the meager fertility rates of the cosmopolitan Starbucks drinking city dweller. Here we can see that the Amish and the Haredim have some 6 children per woman, while other conservative groups that have embraced modern technology, such as the Mormons, most Catholics, and non-mainline Protestant denominations, have fallen from similar numbers to statistics barely above replacement. For example, the Mormons have seen a great reduction in their respective birth rates, and the same can be seen in most other conservative denominations across the West. Not to mention the fact that many young people are abandoning the religion of their conservative yet technophilic parents. In fact, non-affiliation is set to become the largest religious group in most Western countries, and this is not because they have high fertility rates, quite the opposite. Their numbers grow because they are absorbing millions of young people that were raised in religious households that have since stopped believing. So we can say conclusively that the communities that have successfully resisted modernity are those that reject technology in their daily lives. If there is another community that does not reject technology and yet remains traditional, please tell me. I would love to read about them. But so far, we have 2 possible trajectories for the conservatives. 1, they remain a part of the modern world and their tradition will be slowly corroded, or they go full Amish and reject the modern world to protect their tradition. So, does this mean that the conservatives must return to tradition and reject the modern world? Well, it's not that simple. Both the Haredim and the Amish are living in highly traditional enclaves inside modern states that provide security and some of the benefits of technology, such as modern medicine. If there was an independent Amish or Haredi state, it would be very, very different because they would be forced to embrace technology. Their hand would be forced, at the very least, on matters of national defense. If they completely reject technology, they will be easy prey for their neighbors who do have drones, jets, and tanks. There are many historical examples of what happens when a traditional culture faces a technologically advanced foe. But my favorite is the Anglo-Zanzibar War, which lasted 38 minutes, which is how long it took to declare war, to fire the guns of the Royal Navy, and then to accept the surrender. The issue is that in order to have a modern military, you also need a strong industrial base. You need computers to guide your missiles, steel mills to make your tanks, and cutting-edge engineering to design your planes. And before anybody says that you do not need modern technology to win a war nowadays because the Taliban did it with knockoff AK-47s and IEDs, you need to remember that they were not fighting a ruthless enemy. If you want to know what happens when you try a guerrilla war against a ruthless enemy, you should read about the Forest Brothers insurgency in the Baltic against Stalin's Soviet Union. Spoilers, they did not win. But the amount of technology required to have the necessary military strength to defend your base strat state is going to undermine its own foundations. That, my dear readers, is what we call a paradox. Traditionalists cannot live with technology, and quite ironically, they cannot live without it. So what are we to make of this? I think that we can conclude that all of humanity is locked in a sort of Faustian arms race. We need to push forward with breakneck technological progress and suffer the consequences, or refuse to do so and suffer those consequences instead. This process will have graver and graver consequences in the future as we develop technologies that will have a larger potential to change our lives in a deeper way, such as genetic modification and artificial intelligence. We can barely guess where this technology will take us in the future. 5 years ago, AI-generated images and LLMs were pure speculation, but now we are facing the very real consequences of these technologies. This is a cycle that I do not believe we can escape. The question is, what can we do about it? So far, most traditional values have proven to be fragile, and the only way to preserve them is to artificially separate them from the real world. Does this mean that one should give up trying to preserve their traditions and their morals because there is no way to stop technological progress? Well, not necessarily. The reason that the traditional values of Western culture have been shown to be so fragile is that they were made for another world. For example, the idea of waiting until marriage was made for a world where people lived in small communities and where couples were expected to have 8 children with the hope that half of them made it into adulthood. Therefore, it is not surprising that a lifestyle of urban atomization with Tinder and the birth control pill broke these values. So, the central question of this essay would be, how can we live in a rapidly changing society without becoming completely deracinated and alienated from our past and from our values? My conclusion is that if we want tradition to survive rapid technological change, we need to have values and traditions that can adapt to a changing world. But this might seem like a contradiction. How can we have traditions and values that can adapt to technological and social change? Although at first glance it might seem that it is something impossible, I don't think so. Many values are timeless to all human beings, such as honesty, diligence, and bravery. They can adapt to many changing circumstances and will always be intrinsically admired by everyone. Indeed, each society will have their own expressions of these values. Indeed, in a certain sense, they are eternal. Furthermore, aesthetic appreciation also remains a human constant, since it appeals to our sense of beauty, and therefore we will not stop appreciating the beauty of the natural world or of the human body. This aesthetic sense is also something that is present in all cultures, even if some of them don't engage with it in a healthy way. Fundamentally, I am quite pessimistic when it comes to the future of most conservatives. I admire what they are doing, but until they have an answer to this terrible dilemma, they will continue to fail and wither away. So far, I have not been able to see any conclusive case of a conservative society being able to balance technology and traditional virtues. Therefore, I've come to conclude that the only values that can adapt to our changing world are those that are universal and represent an eternal part of the human condition. So I believe that Kaczynski's quote is fundamentally right. Conservatism is dying. It has been dying for a long time, and it is time that we noticed. The conclusion of this essay is that we cannot stand still because the world does not stand still. To seize the future, the right wing cannot stay in the past. We must adapt. But in order to adapt, to give new shapes to our old values, we must do something that conservatives have forgotten to do. We must learn to dream again. Thanks for watching, and thank you for your time.